"Jamie, there's a storm coming," I remember my mom saying as she yelled up the stairs every time a storm came through our area when I was a kid. I was maybe 5 or 6 at the time. I would drop whatever I was doing in my room, practically jump down the stairs, and run as fast as my little legs could take me out to the front porch. I would stand anxiously at the railing, looking up at the skies and wait excitedly for the storm to come. You see, I am infatuated with storms, thunderstorms in particular. They're my favorite, but I didn't know why. There was something about them that intrigued me. I thought it was the sound, or maybe the cloud formations, or maybe seeing the lightning bolts pierce through the skies, or maybe I was just nuts. I don't know. Anyway, when I was 16, I got my driver's license. My mom bought me a 1979 Ford Pinto. I don't care what anyone says. I love that car. I would watch the Weather Channel constantly, find out if a storm was coming, where it was gonna hit, then drive there if it was close enough, and sometimes get caught in it as I did. It was so exhilarating, chasing the storm. I almost wrecked my car a couple of times trying to drive through the rain and wind. I didn't have any friends to hang out with. All the kids in school thought I was weird for purposely driving into storms. Anyway, as I grew into adulthood, I seriously thought about becoming a meteorologist. That way, it would make it easier to become a professional storm chaser. That was until I found out all the different classes you had to take and all the degrees you had to have. Nah, screw it. That's too much work, I told myself. I'll just do it for fun. Although you don't necessarily need a formal education to be a storm chaser, it does help when you're trying to be a professional one. Now that career choice was off the table, I knew I had to get a real job. You see, I flipped burgers at Dino's, a mom and pop burger joint, after school, on the weekends, and all summer long when I was in high school. That's where I got all the money to pay for gas, but Dino's was not going to cut it as a career. So once I graduated, I began filling out applications all over town. I eventually got a job working at 84 Lumber. That was the name of the place. I quit Dino's the same day. I saved some money, moved out of my mom's house, and rented a basement apartment off of a coworker. Anyway, I started out part-time as a floor associate, which is basically someone who walks around on the sales floor all day and asks people if they can help them find anything. It didn't pay much, but it paid better than Dino's. Now, I didn't know anything about lumber when I first started. That's a fancy name for wood, by the way. So I figured if I was going to make this a career, I had to learn everything I could and try to move up in the company as fast as possible. So I did. All the while, I still chased storms on my days off, if there were any. Now, I spent about a year working on the sales floor and learning everything I could about lumber. When I was offered a full-time position, I took it. I didn't know about other companies, but at 84 Lumber, only the full-time employees could move up to management, and that was where the real money was. I worked the sales floor for a couple years more when the assistant manager position became available. The old assistant manager retired after 25 years and moved to Florida. Anyway, I applied for the position and got it. I beat out 3 other guys that had been there longer than me. Anyway, as part of the assistant manager training program, policy states that all trainees must attend a week-long seminar and workshop at 84 Lumber's home office located a few states away. Okay, no problem. My car should make it that far, I thought. I still drive around in that Ford Pinto I mentioned earlier. Now, my store manager called the corporate office and made arrangements for me to attend. I booked a week-long stay at the Winhart Bed and Breakfast, which was only a mile or so from the home office. I drove down there, which took about 3 hours. I attended the seminar and the workshop, got my certificate, and was driving home when it happened. You see, I always check the Weather Channel app on my phone whenever I'm out of town, in case there's a storm nearby. So, before I left the bed and breakfast, I did just that. The app showed that the day was going to be bright and sunny, with no storm clouds in sight. Well, that sucks. Anyway, I left the B&B, got on the highway, and began driving home. Traffic was insane. I was about an hour into my trip when I heard what sounded like a sonic boom as the wind picked up drastically. So much so that it was hard to keep the car on the road. Several large box trucks as well as tractor trailers began swerving left and right. The wind was blowing that hard. The storm clouds moved in quickly at a speed I had never seen before. Cool, I said excitedly. The app said there wasn't gonna be a storm. I pulled over onto the shoulder of the road, stuck my head out of the driver's side window, and watched the storm roll in. I was directly in the middle of it. I was smiling ear to ear. The bright sun-filled sky soon gave way to the dark, menacing clouds as thunder began to roar. Only this time, the thunder sounded different. I don't really know how to explain it, other than saying that it sounded like there were voices in the thunder. Well, not really voices, more like moaning sounds. I know, sounds crazy, right? My excitement began to fade and was replaced with concern. What the hell kind of storm is this? I thought to myself. Lightning soon began flashing in the almost completely black skies as the rain came pouring down hard. The moaning sounds grew louder and more intense. I quickly pulled my head back into the car and rolled up the windows. The lightning then began crashing to the ground, mere seconds after each other, all around me. Several cars and other vehicles began pulling over on the side of the road, just like I was. Now, I could barely see the front of my car through all the rain. It was coming down that hard, and I was just sitting there. I could only imagine what visibility was like driving 55 miles an hour plus in it. Others continued driving down the road, but soon regretted their decision. I can only assume as softball-sized pieces of hail began falling from the lightning-filled skies. I had never seen hail that size before. I went from concerned to completely scared. It began smashing into the vehicles, causing multiple car accidents. Now, all I could basically see through all the rain were tail lights and headlights, all jumbled together. So I assumed there were accidents. Anyway, the hail also began smashing the cars parked on the side of the road, including mine. It put a big dent in the hood, severely cracked my windshield, and busted out my headlight. I thought I was gonna die. Chasing storms is one thing, but this was insane. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, here came the fog. And I'm not talking a little bit of creepy fog. No. I'm talking a complete blanket of bright white fog. Can't see anything fog. Fog so bright that you had to squint your eyes. The moaning sounds were near deafening at this point. I closed my eyes and screamed, "Stop! Stop!" But it didn't stop. It got louder and louder. I put my hands over my ears to try and drown out the noise. I opened my eyes. The fog wasn't so bright now. I began to see faces forming in the fog. That's right. Faces in the fog, outlines of eyes, noses, and mouths. The mouths were opening and closing in rhythm with the moaning sounds. I was completely terrified. I then heard a voice from behind me. I couldn't understand what it was saying. I turned my head around quickly to see this creature, or more like this humanoid sitting in the passenger side backseat. It was this huge black mass in the shape of a person with arms, hands, legs, and feet, as well as a chest and a head. It had bright red eyes. It had no nose and no ears. Its mouth was open, revealing rows of razor-like teeth. I screamed again. As I was screaming, it raised its left arm and pointed out the windshield.
"Look, my son,"
it said in a deep, raspy, almost satanic voice. "Son," I thought. I turned my head back around, looked out of the windshield, expecting to see the storm, but instead I saw a single solitary headstone about 10 feet from the front of my car. There was no lightning, no wind, no storm. The skies were bright and sunny, and somehow my windows were rolled down and my car was undamaged. "What the hell?" I said out loud as I jerked my head back around, staring at an empty back seat. The creature was gone. I hastily extended my right arm around the backseat area and began waving it back and forth. I don't really know why, it was more of an instinct than anything else. I then heard the same deep, raspy voice come from in front of me.
"Look,"
it said, louder and more aggressive, completely scaring me. I quickly brought my arm back in front of me and looked forward. There it was, squatted on top of the headstone.
Look.
It said again. I looked at the writing on the headstone. Donald Henderson, it read. Born April 27th, 1953. Died July 14th, 1988. Written under the dates were the words, Chasing the Storm. Wait a minute, I thought, hanging my head and talking to myself. Donald Henderson, that was my father's name, and that's the day he died. Mom said he died in a car accident when I was 2 years old. What the hell? Chasing the storm? He must have died in a car accident while chasing a storm. That's why I like storms so much, because my dad did, and my conversation with myself was then interrupted by a deep, raspy, moaning sound. I looked up to see the creature now standing on top of the headstone. I leaned forward in the seat as it brought its left arm in front of itself, then extended it back to a presenting fashion, like Vanna White does on Wheel of Fortune. I love that show. Pat Sajak is hilarious. Anyway, I looked where it was pointing and saw another headstone.
Look.
It said once again. I looked closer. It was the same kind of headstone, but the words were different. On this headstone was the name Jamie Henderson. Hold up. My name is Jamie Henderson, and I was born May 22nd, 1986, I thought. I was in complete shock, but the most shocking thing about it was the date it said I died. The date was July 24th, 2021. That's today's date, I thought. Chasing the Storm was written under those dates as well. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Is this for real? Am I really seeing this? Is this creature my father? I thought. I opened the car door and walked to the front of my car, staring at both headstones. The creature then squatted down once again, still on top of the headstone. It extended its right arm to me, as if to shake my hand. I was reluctant to do so. I mean, wouldn't you? Now, I've never backed down from anything in my life, and I wasn't about to start then. I slowly raised my right arm, extended my hand until I was mere inches away from his hand. It suddenly lunged forward, grabbing my hand as it jumped off the headstone. I tried to pull away, but its grip was too tight. It pulled me close. I blinked my eyes, and when I opened them, I swear I saw the man from the picture that sat on my mom's headstand for all those years. The man she said was my father. I blinked my eyes again, but when I opened them this time, I was staring eye to eye, well, eye to red eye with the creature. Dad? I said questionably. I felt its grip tighten.
Stop.
It said, then dissolved into thin air. I was left standing there with my arm extended. My eyes began to feel heavy. My body became lethargic, and then everything went black. I was startled awake to a constant tapping sound. I opened my eyes, back in the driver's seat of my car, back on the side of the road, all by myself. The tapping sound was a state trooper knocking on the driver's side window. I quickly rolled down the window and looked at him confused. "Is everything all right, sir?" he asked. Yes, sir, I'm fine. I just pulled over because I couldn't see through all the rain that was coming down from that storm that just came through. I must have fallen asleep, I said, knowing damn well that I didn't. "Storm, sir?" he said. "Yeah, that was one wicked storm that came through." He just looked at me funny. "Sir, we haven't had a storm or even any rain for that matter in months. Have you been drinking, sir?" he responded. "No rain? No storm? What the hell just happened then?" I thought. "Sir, I asked you a question," he said in a very stern tone. "Oh, I'm sorry. No sir, I don't drink," I replied nervously. "But after what just happened, I think I might start," I jokingly thought. "License and registration, please, sir," he said. I grabbed my wallet from my back pocket and took out my license. I then reached in my glove box and got my registration. I handed them both to him. He walked back to his patrol car, came back a few minutes later, handed them back to me, and said, "You're clean as a whistle. Go on, get out of here and drive safe." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir," I replied, starting the car, and began driving back home. I decided to stop by my mom's house and ask her a few things about my father, so I did. I knocked on the door, and Mom answered. She invited me in, put on a pot of coffee. We chit-chatted while it was brewing, each made a cup when it was done, and sat down at the dining room table and talked. "Mom, how did Dad die?" I asked. In a car accident, son. I told you that, she answered. What was he doing when he had the accident, Mom? I asked sternly but respectfully. She just looked at me. Mom, answer me, please, I said. She sighed, then said with tears in her eyes, he was chasing a storm, just like you do. He took you out for a father-son day. You were supposed to go to the park. He called me from a payphone shortly after you left and told me that he heard on a scanner that a storm was supposed to hit nearby and that he was going to take you to your first storm. I don't really know what happened. All I know is that lightning hit the base of a telephone pole which fell on your father's car. When they cleared the pole and found the body, they found you underneath him, crying but alive. He gave his life to save you, son, she said, wiping her eyes, got up from the table and asked, more coffee? Sure, Mom, I replied. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. I didn't want you to feel guilty, she answered. You have the same passion that he did for chasing storms. I was not going to discourage you from that. I see a lot of him in you, son. Thanks, Mom, but my storm chasing days are over, I said. She just looked at me funny. I then told her the story, except for the humanoid part. I just told her it was Dad. Anyway, she cried again. We talked about Dad for hours after that. I finally kissed her goodnight around 10 o'clock and drove home. I slept like a baby that night. I called my mom the next day and asked her if she could show me how to get to Dad's grave. You see, I didn't know where he was buried, and Mom never told me. She agreed. I picked her up, got some flowers from the florist, and we drove to the cemetery, about 45 minutes away. We pulled in and drove straight to the site. I was taken back by what I saw. My father's headstone looked just like the one in the premonition. There was an empty plot next to him, with a blank headstone marking it. I'll be buried with your father, Jamie, and you'll be buried next to us, if you want to, son, my mother said, pointing to each gravesite. We placed the flowers on the grave, said a prayer, and left. Now, I'm still the assistant manager at 84 Lumber. I still drive that Ford Pinto, and yeah, I'm still infatuated with storms, even though I don't chase them anymore. They still intrigue me. I now sit in my nice comfy living room on a couch watching the Weather Channel religiously and any storm-related videos on YouTube. When I need a quick fix, I had a copy made of the picture my mom had on her nightstand of my father. I framed it and put it on my coffee table. So that way, Dad and I can watch the storms together.